Welcome to Lesson 10, using photos, live trace, and printing. Go on to Adobe Illustrator. And first thing I want to show you is how to locate photographs that might be suitable for use in some of your documents, and also how to embed those photographs and use live trace. Now there's only a few occasions during the term that I will allow you to use photographs, and you do need to clear a photograph usage with me before you put it into your document. It's important that you guys do not rely on photographs to carry your images at this stage or your designs at this stage. I'm going to start by doing a simple search for an object, and I use Google. Click on images, and of course you have multiple images here. Before you use a photograph, you do need to make sure that the size is appropriate. So have a look at the size, and also make sure that these are JPEG images that you are using. Pings will also work, but for our purpose I want you guys to stick with JPEGs, and you need to go for a larger file size. These small files like this, once you blow them up to use in your document, will be too pixelized and just too low of a resolution to be used. So do look for a larger file. Once you find the one that you want, you can save it to your desktop. I found one earlier, but there are certainly hundreds of pretty much anything that you want to find. You'll find it within Google Images. Let's go into Adobe Illustrator. There's a couple different ways to get an image into your document, and the first one is of course copy and paste, which I'm sure you guys are all familiar with. The better way to use it for Adobe Illustrator is to go under File and Place, and find your image, and then hit place. And once you've done this, you want to make sure that you click on the Embed button. Once you hit Embed, it will be embedded within your document, and anywhere which your document will go, the image, the photograph will actually be embedded within that document, and it will go with the document. So for instance, if you make a PDF file to submit to class, or if you want to send it to a printer, or whatever the case is, the photograph will be embedded within the file. It's very, very important that you do that. Okay, first thing you want to do is probably resize your photograph so that it fits within the artboard. To resize your document, if you want to keep the same aspect ratio, which you probably do, you want to hit the Shift button as you're dragging this down. Okay, and drag that back up. Might make that a little bit larger. Okay, but the Shift button will allow you to maintain the correct aspect ratio for your picture. Alright, so that is simply embedding a photograph, and you'll see the photograph is embedded up here, and if you click on this, it'll ask you to update the link if the link has been broken, and that just simply means that it's lost the file, so you will need to relink it. Embed button was right here, so it tells you a little bit about the image here under the Image Qualities button. Alright. Once a photograph is embedded, you can use it like a lot of different objects within your document. There are some things that are not open to you. Some of these may not be open for different types of photograph or different sizes of photograph, but a lot of these will be as well. And you can use a lot of these techniques on photographs just as you would into any other object, whether it be a simple ellipse or a rectangle or whatever the case is. So you can use a lot of these on your photographs as well. But again, please, if you're planning on using a photograph within your document, you need to make sure that one, the assignment will allow for that, and two, you do need to get specific permission to use a photograph within your document. We have to be very, very careful about copyright infringement within this class, seeing as it is an online class, and please make sure that you clear that with me beforehand. Alright, another technique that you can use with a photograph is called live tracing. And live tracing is pretty interesting. It can be a lot of fun to play with. It's also one way to help you draw an object if you're having really difficulty drawing a rather complex object. Live trace can sometimes help with that. Sometimes it makes it more complicated, but sometimes it can simplify the process for you. Okay, so I'm going to have this selected with my regular selection tool. I'm going to go up to Object, Live Trace, and Tracing Options. Let me cancel this a sec. Make this so it's a little easier for you guys to see. Alright, so again, Object, Live Trace, and Tracing Options. I always click on Preview so that I can see what I'm doing and see what it will work at. And it will take some time to redraw each one of these, so do be aware of the time that you're going to take to do some of these things. I'm going to start with a photo low fidelity. I seem to have pretty good luck with this. And for every one of these presets, you do have multiple settings down here that we'll look at as well. Okay, so that's the initial low fidelity photo setting. And you'll see that right now this has 1,777 paths and more than 15,000 anchor points. This is a very complex object at this stage, but it is an object, and it is an object where you can actually expand this and make it so that each individual color separation is an object that you can further edit. I'm going to simplify this further. The first thing I'm going to do is take the maximum colors down. I'm going to try about 7 and see how that looks. And this will simplify the object dramatically. Okay, I'm also going to choose to output this to swatches, and this takes each of the colors of this object and puts it into the swatch palette once I do the live trace. Okay, other ways to simplify this image, because this is still a very complex image. I'm going to also increase the blur, and it simply blurs the photograph, so it knocks down the detail of it before it does the live trace. So this will also simplify it a little bit. I'll do that just a little more. It makes subtle changes at this point. Okay, but you see it's starting to get a little bit less detailed. Okay, you can also change the path fitting in the minimum area, and these can be quite useful. And if your photograph happens to have a white background, you'll probably want to click on Ignore White. This makes it much more simple as well to work with. Okay, I'm going to change the minimum area. This is still quite detailed. I'm going to pop that quite high. Okay, and you see it doesn't change the look of it that much. It simplifies it a little bit further, but look at the number of paths and number of anchors that we've gotten down to. And path fitting will also simplify further. And once you've gotten this to a point where you think it's a little more manageable, and we will do a trace, and I'll show you the next step. Okay, this has us down to 96 paths and 1,418 anchors. Still pretty complex, but a little more usable than what it was before. And you can experiment with all these different tracing options. Once you click on one of these, then you can start customizing it using some of these other functions in here. But these are all pretty useful, and they all have different looks, and some of them work better for some photographs that you might find. Others work better for other photos. So you have to really experiment a lot with this particular tool. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and hit trace. Okay, and before I do anything with this object while it's still selected, I'm going to click on expand. And expand will convert one object into multiple objects. So now all these little paths are all selectable and editable. Okay, and then once I do this, I can ungroup this group of paths. And now I can individually select each individual path that I want to edit, and I can work with it that way. You may also choose to eliminate the background, and there's a few different ways you can do this. I'm going to select this corner with just the greens in it. I'm going to go up to select, same color, and see what it grabs. It grabbed a few extras, but not many. I'm going to delete those. And you can slowly start simplifying this object down. Okay, you start and get the idea here. But this will get you down just to the simple flower shape if you keep working it. And if you look at swatches, you'll see how all those colors have been outputted to swatches. So now you have all the colors of this particular flower in place. Now by the time I simplify and pull out all the greens, I'm only going to be left, I believe, with 3 different colors. And that's this bright pink color, this darker pink purple color, and then this pale color here. And once you get to that point, then you can really start using this as an object much more easily. Do you remember after you simplify your object down to group all the remaining objects together so that you have one single object? Otherwise, when you start moving things around, you'll just be moving pieces, which might be what you want, but it might not be, so do be aware of that. Okay, but that's using live trace. And again, if you plan to use a photograph in any document that you plan to submit to class, you need to make sure that you get it cleared with me first. Okay, but this is one technique to help you draw with objects. Okay, last thing I want to talk to you guys about for this lesson is printing. And you do not really have to print anything for class submission. We're doing everything electronically, of course, but there may be reasons that you want to print something for at home, especially for a portfolio that you might use in an interview or something like that, and you want to take things with you. Okay, for any document, you go down to File, Print, and you do need to be careful on your settings here. Most of the time, you will need to hit Fit to Page, which will give you a little bit of a white border all the way around your object. You also have the ability of moving your document within the printed area. And for some documents that perhaps go off the artboard, you might need to do a little bit more adjustment with all these types of things. If you have a document that you have started at a larger size, perhaps you're doing a poster of 16 inches by 20 inches, for instance, you can tile that across multiple pages. And your document, if it's a larger document than this one is, it will be tiled across multiple pages. And then you can print these out. If you cut very carefully along the print lines, then you can actually tile these together onto a single board. So this is a very useful thing too. Every once in a while, someone will come across a need to adjust the print layers. Most of the time, visible and printable layers will be your option that you'll want to keep with. Occasionally, if you don't see everything on your document, you want to check your print layers and click on all layers. At some point, you may have accidentally put something on another layer or purposely. We haven't really talked about using layers in these lessons, but that is an option for you. It's a more complicated process of creating a document, but if you have a very complex design that you're working with, then it is important that you use layers. We might get to that a little bit later in the term, depending on the complexity of people's projects. Okay, there also might be needs where you need to go into marks, and you might need to do trim marks, especially for tiling something. It will give you trim marks to make it a little bit easier to trim off the white edges, and you can do that quite easily. For output, you probably will not have much use for this, not at this stage. Graphics, you won't be using too much either. Color handling, your standard color handling will probably work for you. Advanced and summary. So these are all different kind of higher level printing options. Most of the time for people working at home with a home printer, you're not going to need to deal with most of these things. If you're taking it to a printer, then they would have specifications that they would ask you about. Most of these are under general, and of course you select your printer up here. Okay, once you're happy with all this and what you see here is what you want it to look like, then you can simply hit print. And it should print out quite nicely for you. The colors should be nice and bright. The edges should be nice and sharp. Remember, we are working with vector images, not raster images. Rasterized images are what we might use with Photoshop, and the edges are fuzzy and it's all pixelated. Okay, and that's fine for certain images such as a photograph, but if you're working with Adobe Illustrator and producing vector images or vector graphics, then you do need to make sure those edges are nice and sharp. That's what Adobe Illustrator will give you. And if you output this to a PDF file, that PDF file should have the same crisp edges for you. Alright, that is the end of Lesson 10. Lessons 11 through 15 will actually be creating some simple objects using some of the techniques that we've learned in Lessons 1 through 10. You'll need to review these lessons as you need to, so make sure you keep them on your hard drive. Hopefully you have saved them to your hard drive and you can access them easily at any point that you need them to. Alright, so we'll move on with the Lessons 11 through 15.